السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله على إحسانه وشكر له على تفضله وامتنانه، ولا إله إلا الله تعظيما لشأنه، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله داعي إلى رضوانه وعلى آله وأصحابه وإخوانه. أما بعد، يا من يرى ما في الضمير ويسمع، أنت المعد لكل ما يتوقع، يا من يرجى لشدائد كلها، يا من إليه المشتكى والمفزع، يا من خزائن رزقه في قوله كن أمن فإن الخير عندك أجمع، ما لي سوى فقري إليك وسيلة فبالافتقار إليك فقري أدفع، ما لي سوى قرع لبابك حيلة فلئن رددت فأي باب أقرع، وما الذي أدعو وأهتف باسمه إن كان فضلك عن فقيرك يمنع، حاشا لمجدك أن تقنط عاسيا الفضل أجزل والمواهب أوسع. إخواني في الله, we are continuing with our lecture series regarding the signs of the Day of Judgment. We are looking at the sign of the Day of Judgment that is related to the Mongolians, the Tatar. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, لا تقوم الساعة حتى يقاتل المسلمون ترك. He says the hour will not be established until the Muslims will fight people of Turkish origin. And he continues, he describes them in a hadith in Bukhari. He says, صغار الأعين حمر الوجوه ذلف الأنف كأن وجوههم المجال المطرقة. He says, number one, صغار الأعين, they have small eyes. Number two, red-faced complexion. Number three, they have small noses that are very wide. And number four, their faces are round and butted in. So we mentioned from the signs of the Day of Judgment is the emergence or the appearance of this group of the Mongolians, the Tatar. And we mentioned in three in particular had a great devastating effect on the Muslims: Genghis Khan, Hulagu Khan, and we shall look later at another man called Timur Lenk in the lecture tomorrow, inshallah. Ikhwani fillah, in the year 658 of the Hijri calendar, the year 658 of the Hijri calendar, in the month of Muharram, the city of Baghdad had already fallen. This is the capital of the Muslims for over 500 years, the capital of Abbasids. Damascus also fell, the capital of the Bani Umayyah. The two capital cities in Islamic history had fallen. So in the month of Muharram, the year 658 of the Hijri calendar, that evil man, Hulagu Khan, who had the blood of many Muslims, he sends his ambassadors to Cairo with a threatening letter. He gives the people of Egypt two options: either surrender or be finished, be massacred like we massacred the people of Syria, the people of Iraq, the people of Iran, as Kazakhstan, all these Muslim countries, we massacred them. We shall massacre you, O people of Egypt, if you do not surrender to our terms. So this is a letter, a scary letter that was sent to the leader of the Muslims in Egypt, Qutuz, Muhammad Qutuz rahimahullah. He reads the letter and he looks at the ambassadors who are threatening him with war, with violence, with killing, with the raping of the women. He says these two ambassadors, kill them, behead them, and put their heads on the gates so that everyone can know that this mujrimun, we shall deal with them for the sake of Islam, for the sake of deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, I, as the leader of Egypt, declare war on the Tatar. I declare jihad on the people of Mongolian who have been attacking the entire world. Ikhwani fillah, the Mongolians in this century were the superpower. They conquered a landmass that has never been seen in history, even till today. The largest combined or one land from Korea, from China, from Thailand, all the way to Europe, to Ukraine, to Poland, to Turkey, to Iraq, to Syria. They conquered all this land, all these square kilometers. This was the biggest empire ever seen by human beings. And they massacred people from every part of the world. They massacred Chinese people, Korean people, Muslims, they massacred Europeans, Russians. These people were murderers. They massacred so many people. So this man, Muhammad Qutuz rahimahullah, he says, I shall fight them for the sake of the deen of Allah, for the sake of Islam. Of course, his advisors, his ministers, some of his generals, they did not like that. Telling him, you're going to fight such a great army, an army that has never lost. For 40 years, the Mongolians had not lost any battle. They were known as undefeated in battle for a very long time. And you want to fight them? He says, yes, I shall fight them and I shall go meet them in Palestine. They have conquered Palestine, Lebanon, Syria. I shall go meet them in Palestine. I shall go meet them there. So he tells the ulama, start giving people words of advice. Recite to them the Quran. Recite to them the verses related to jihad. Recite to them the hadiths related to defending your religion, to defending your family, defending your honor, defending your lives. So the ulama, they start giving khutbah. They start giving durus, calling the people to defend the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قاتلوا الذين لا يؤمنون بالله ولا باليوم الآخر ولا يحرمون ما حرم الله ورسوله ولا يدينون دين الحق. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا ما لكم إذا قيل لكم انفروا في سبيل الله ثاقلتم إلى الأرض أرضيتم بالحياة الدنيا من الآخرة فما متاع الحياة الدنيا في الآخرة إلا قليل. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قاتلوا الذين لا يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وما لكم لا تقاتلون في سبيل الله والمستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والولدان الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها واجعل لنا من لدنك وليا واجعل لنا من لدنك نصيرا الذين آمنوا يقاتلوا في سبيل الله والذين كفروا يقاتلون في سبيل الطاغوت فقاتلوا أولياء الشيطان إن كيد الشيطان كان ضعيفا. So the ulama, they start reciting to the people these verses from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, exhorting them, encouraging them to defend Islam. For if you do not defend Islam on this day, there will be no more Islam remaining in the land. The lands of Islam have all been captured. The Muslims have been massacred everywhere. You are the last bastion. You are the last fortress. You are the last fortress. You are the last standing Muslims. Defend Islam. So the ulama, led by the Sultan of the ulama, Al-Izz bin Abdul Salam, and others, they start encouraging the Muslims. So from Muharram until the month of Sha'ban, the great leader of Egypt, Muhammad Qutuz, prepares his army, prepares the Muslims for the eventuality of fighting the Mongolians. This is the year 658 of the Hijri calendar, 2 years after the fall of Baghdad. So after Sha'ban, the great army of the Muslims is ready. So Muhammad Qutuz, as he promised, he sends a part of the army first, led by Ruknuddin Beirbaz. Ruknuddin Beirbaz, Dahir Beirbaz, one of the greats of Islamic history, a man who has never lost a battle ever. So this man, with a small part of the army, he leaves a place called Salihiyah in Egypt. He crosses the Sinai and enters into Gaza. And in Gaza, he meets a small army of the Mongolians, and he fights them and he defeats them thoroughly, and a small group of them escape to Lebanon to meet with their great leader who was there at the time, Qatbugha Nuwayn. So the Muslims were victorious. But the Mongolians, when they went to give news to their leader in Lebanon, they told them the size of the army and the number of soldiers and how their tactics they were using. So they thought that the entire army of the Muslims was this small group of Muslims who attacked them in Lebanon. But the great leader Muhammad Qutuz had planned for that. So he hid most of his army behind in Egypt and brought them in slowly into the land of Palestine. So after Gaza, the Muslims started going around Palestine, going to many of the cities of Palestine until they reached a place called Ain Jaloot, the Spring of Goliath, where Dawood alayhi salam is said to have killed Jaloot, as mentioned in the Quran and also in the Bible. So they chose this place, Ruknuddin Beirbaz chose this place because it has 3 hills. A hill on the west, a hill on the east, and a hill towards the south. So he came with his army and encamped towards the north, with 3 hills behind them, to the east, to the west, and to the south. So Qatbugha Nuwayn is coming from the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, is coming with this great army of Mongolians who have never tasted defeat in their entire history. They have defeated the entire world, the Europeans, the Muslims, the Chinese, the people of Thailand, they've defeated everyone. But this was their day. This was the day that will come to them. So Qatbugha Nuwayn comes with this great army. This is the 24th of Ramadan, the year 658 of the Hijri calendar. And if you know about Ramadan, it is the month of victories for Muslims. The great battle of Badr was in this month. The conquest of Mecca was in this month. The conquering of Andalus was in this month. And many other conquests were in the month of Ramadan. So on the 24th of Ramadan, a Thursday, the army of Qutb and Nuwayn, it comes to the battlefield, and the army of Ruknuddin Berbers is there. The army of Muhammad Qutb is hidden in the hills. He's hidden in these hills. Hidden completely. No one knows they're there. They're hidden from view. So that night, the Muslims, they spend in dua. They make qiyamul layl. They say goodbye to each other. They say al-liqa al-jannah. We shall meet in Jannah. We are going to Jannah. We smell the smell of Jannah. So they remind themselves of this imaniyat. A lot of the iman increases, and they pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them either victory or shahada. فَإِمَّا النَّصْرُ وَإِمَّا shahada. Either victory or martyrdom in the battlefield. So they make a lot of dua. Then comes Friday, the 25th of Ramadan, the year 658 of the Hijri calendar. One of the most historic dates, not only in Islamic history, but in world history completely. The 25th of Ramadan, a Friday, the year 658 of the Hijri calendar, one of the most historic dates, not only in Islamic history, but in world history. The Muslims, they pray the Salat al-Fajr. With all the iman, they pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the sun rises, and the army of Qutb and Nuwayn and the Mongolians comes to the battlefield, to the opening of the valley of Ain Jaloot. The Muslims were not there. Then the Muslims started descending one by one from the hills. The army of Ruknuddin Berbers. So the first army, they descend, all of them are wearing clean uniform, red and white. Very beautiful how they come down. So they descend. Qutb and Nuwayn is very impressed by these Muslims. He asks one of the Muslim generals who was supporting him in quotes. He was not actually supporting him. He says to him, Sarim Aybak, who is this? Who are these people? They say this is the battalion of Sunkur al-Rumi, one of the generals of the Mamalik, of the Dawla of the Mamalik. He says, MashaAllah, impressive, very impressive. Another group of the Muslims descends. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. All of them are wearing yellow and white. Very neat, very tidy, like a military parade. They come down. So the armies come down in bits. After they've descended, and the Muslims are all gathered, and all of them takbir, Allahu Akbar, قاتلوهم يعذبهم الله بأيديكم ويخزهم وينصركم عليهم ويشفي صدور قوم مؤمنين. Fight them so that you get comfort. Fight them for the Muslims who have been massacred in Baghdad, in Damascus, in Aleppo, in Naysabur, in Bukhara, in Hamadan, in all those areas of the Muslims. Today is the day of Islam. So the army of the Muslims is there. The small part of the front of the army versus the Mongolians. So the Mongolian, he says, he says, you guys are very impressive, but you're very few. I think because of time, let me finish this battle very quickly. So he sends his entire army to fight these Muslims. His entire army. So the Muslims, they start fighting with the Mongolians, and they are patient. Regardless of their smaller numbers initially, they are patient. They want to make these Mongolians spend all their strength, use all their strength. So when the other Muslims comes to support, the Mongolians in a state of weakness. So they fight bravely, and many Muslims lose their lives as shuhada. Therein, Muhammad Qutb, when he sees the Muslims are becoming weaker, he calls the division of the sound division, hit the drums so that the Muslims can pretend to retreat. So the Muslims start retreating from the mouth of the valley, going backwards towards the south. As they're retreating, the Mongolians also follow them. So the Mongolians are following them into the valley. They follow them, the Muslims pretend to retreat. They follow them, the Muslims pretend to retreat. Until all the Mongolians were inside the valley and the Muslims were there. Therein, Muhammad Qutb rahimahullah, the great leader of the Muslims of Egypt, he says to all the Muslims, now all of you get down, fight the Mongolians, fight these people who have been massacring Muslims, fight for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Muslims descend from the east, the west, and the south, all of them towards the battlefield. And a small group rushes towards the back of the Mongolians to close all roads for the Mongolians. The Mongolians, ikhwani fillah, are surrounded from all sides. What an excellent battle tactic. This is the same tactic that is used in the Muslims when they fought in Nahawand in Persia. Nu'man ibn Muqarrin and Al-Qaqa' ibn Amr, they used the same tactic to finish off the Persians. So the Mongolians are surrounded from all sides. They were deceived to enter with the entire army into the battlefield. They did not leave any space or any room to retreat. And this is one of the biggest blunders you can make as a general. Whenever you go to fight a war as a general, make sure you have a way of escaping. Anything can happen in the battlefield. Make sure you have a way in case anything goes wrong. That is my route for retreating. But Qatbugh al-Nuwayn, with the kibr he had, with the arrogance he had massacred Muslims for generations. Who are these Muslims? I am going to teach them a lesson. He entered with his entire army. And the Muslims descended and they started fighting. And the Mongolians, they saw, there's so many Muslims. They fought even more fiercely. And the right wing of the Mongolians was stronger than the left wing. So the right wing of the Mongolians started hitting the left wing of the Muslims very severely until the Muslims were in great danger of them themselves being destroyed or surrounded. Therein, the great leader of the Muslims, Muhammad Qutuz, he saw that. He removed his shield, he removed his cloak of iron, and he descended to the field with one of the greatest calls of Islamic history. He says, Wa Islama, Wa Islama, my Islam, my Islam, our Islam, this is our religion. This is the day to protect Islam. Islam will not remain after this day. We are the last people standing to protect the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Wa Islama, Wa Islama, and he descends into the battlefield. And the Muslims, when they see their leaders usually just sit over there and wait for everything to end. If they're victorious, they come. If they are defeated, they run. But this man is coming to participate with them. Blood with blood, sand with sweat, everything is with them. They got more morale. It increased their morale. And they started fighting the Mongolians even more fiercely. One of the Muslims from Syria, one of the leaders, is called Jamaluddin al-Shamsi. Jamaluddin Ukash al-Shamsi. He says, that is Qatbugh al-Nuwayn. One of the generals from the time of Genghis Khan. 40 years ago he was present. This is the man who besieged Baghdad and killed the Muslims of Baghdad. This is a man who killed the Muslims of Aleppo. Today is the day. And he enters into the battlefield. He breaks into the ranks of the Mongolians until he reaches the general of the Mongolians, Qatbugh al-Nuwayn, and he finishes him and he kills him. وَيَوْمَئِذِ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ يَنْصُرُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ. And on that day, the believers will get so much happiness, so much joy for the victory of Allah. Allah has given them victory. So the leader of the Mongolians, Qatbugh al-Nuwayn, was finished. When the Mongolians saw their leader is finished, they said, no, we have no choice. Now for the first time in a long time, we have to run. We have to run away. And the only way to run is through this exit that is blocked now. So they fought all their strength to escape from this from this exit. And they managed to. And they escaped. But the Muslims were saying, no, we're not leaving you. Today is the day of Islam. Today is the day of Muslims. Today is the day of victory for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they followed these Mongolians until a place called Baysan. When the Mongolians saw that these Muslims are not going to leave them, they formed ranks again and they started fighting the Muslims. A battle that was even more fierce than this battle of Ain Jaloot. They fought fiercely. And alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave victory to the ibadullah. Allah gave victory to the Muslims. And every single Mongolian was killed in the battle. Not one single one escaped. Ikhwani fillah, this is one of the greatest days in Islamic history, in world history. The battle of Ain Jaloot in the month of Ramadan, 25th Ramadan, the year 658 of the Hijri calendar. More good news comes later, Ikhwani fillah. In the history of the Mongolians, over 95% of them, they accepted Islam. They all accepted Islam. So most of these great grandchildren of Genghis Khan, of Hulagu Khan, they are now our brothers in Islam. They all accepted and reverted to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were enemies yesterday, but today they were from the armies of Islam. They were from the people protecting the deen of Allah. Khani fillah, this is one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, that we Muslims shall fight the Mongolians, we shall fight the Tatar. Just in summary, to take what we have taken so far from the signs of the Day of Judgment, sign number 1. This is not a history class, so I had to summarize everything regarding the Mongolians, regarding Ali ibn Abi Talib previously, regarding Khawarij. So inshallah, maybe in future lectures we shall look at that in more detail. So from the signs of the Day of Judgment we have taken so far, number 1 was the coming of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 2 was the splitting of the moon. Number 3 was the death of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 4 was the conquering of Bayt al-Maqdis. Number 5 was the plague of Amwas, where we lost many of the Sahaba of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 6, there will be so much wealth amongst the Muslims that no one will accept sadaqah. And this happened at the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Number 7, there will be a lot of fitna, a lot of trials and tribulations in the ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 8, there will be false who? False prophets. Amongst them Musaylim al-Kadhdhab, Tulayh al-Asadi, who else? Sajah, and no. That's number 8. Number 9, there shall be a lot of security in the lives of a Muslim, so much so that a woman travels from the land of Hira by herself until Mecca. Number 10, from the signs of the Day of Judgment we mentioned, is that a great fire will appear in the land of Hijaz, and this great fire is so great that it will be seen as far as Busra in the land of Syria in Sham. And this happened in the year 654 of the Hijri calendar. And sign number 11 is the emergence or the appearance of the Turkish people who will fight the Muslims and will take from them the rulership, or from the Quraysh will take the rulership. So these are the minor signs we have taken so far. We only left with looking at Timur Lenk, one of the evil men who accepted Islam, but he became a Shia Muslim and he massacred the cities of Baghdad and Damascus. This is what we shall look at in a forthcoming lecture. Wallahu alam, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.